Welcome to Governance Talks, the monthly podcast of GUBERNA, the Institute for Directors. In each episode, we sit down with leaders for whom good governance is a real conviction. We talk about how they organize it, what drives their thinking, and what works in practice, because we believe that sharing those convictions is one of the best ways to inspire boards and directors. And today I have a very special guest. Francesco Vanni d'Archirafi is the chair of Euroclear Holding and Euroclear SA.NV. The institution settles trillions of euros in security transactions every single day and sits at the very heart of Europe's financial system. And over the past few months, it has rarely been out of the news. Before joining Euroclear, Francesco spent 38 years at Citi. He led businesses across Europe and the Americas, served as CEO of Citi Transaction Services and Citi Holdings, and was chair of Citibank Europe. A career that has taken him through virtually every dimension of international finance. Since 2021, he chairs Euroclear. At a moment when the institution is navigating geopolitical turbulence, new regulation, and the rise of artificial intelligence. Quite a boardroom to be sitting in. Francesco Vanni d'Archirafi, it is a great pleasure to welcome you to Governance Talks.
Well, Sandra, it's a pleasure to be here with you, and good morning to all.
The geopolitical exposure that hits Euroclear for months now has a very concrete boardroom dimension. But geopolitics is driven by decisions made at a political level, not only and always by Euroclear itself. So how does a board deal with the risk that is outside its traditional merit and that it can probably not fully control? So very concretely, how does your board deal with the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on Euroclear?
Well, it's a long question, but it's where we are today. So I would answer saying very carefully. And geopolitics not only has had an impact on Euroclear recently, but if you look backwards, Brexit had an impact on Euroclear. We moved our basically head office from London to Brussels. And so over the years, geopolitics has always had an impact in all businesses, including in our own. Now, the unfortunate invasion of Ukraine has led to a series of consequences that means that we have a lot of immobilized liabilities that represents the assets of Russian investors and the Russian central bank on our books. And those immobilized liabilities have on the other side, they had securities which were in custody with us because we managed the reserves of around 100 central banks around the globe. And when those matured, they became cash. And because we could not repay the cash to the beneficiaries like we normally do, they stayed on our balance sheet. And because rates went up during this period, it started to generate a lot of positive interest rates, and we don't pay interest rate to our depositors because we're a systemically relevant financial market infrastructure, and to reduce the counterparty risk by policy, we decided to keep our balance sheet low. So we don't pay interest, as disincentive for our clients to leave money on our balance sheet. So to make a long story short, cash balances went through the roof. We started earning a lot of interest. We agreed, and the board and our shareholders agreed to give most of that interest derived from the immobilized Russian liabilities to the budget of the union. And then what happened is that people started to focus on the frozen assets. But the reality, there are no frozen assets. There are immobilized liabilities. And we thought that was wrong. Wrong for many reasons. Wrong for the euro, wrong for the, benefiting from the interest of foreign investors into the euro and investing in Europe. And so we went very transparently explaining to everybody that wanted to listen, including the policymakers, including the Belgian government, why we thought that taking those assets was a very, very bad idea. And, there was a lot of stress, a lot of board discussions. I think our executives have done a fantastic job explaining our position. And at the end, common sense prevailed. And, in December, the decision by the council was that they would borrow to fund Ukraine. So it was a good ending, but a very stressful period for Euroclear indeed. And, the lesson is that you can never foresee what the ecosystem will bring, but what you can do is do a lot of scenario planning so that at least you are as best prepared as possible as a company to navigate even very difficult periods.
Thank you. I think you gave a very clear and understandable answer for our members, and you also highlighted, I think, the role of the board and the role of the board of Euroclear, who is by definition a guardian of the stability, because Euroclear sitting at the heart of the financial system. This stability is very important, and the world around us demands not only stability, but also anticipation. And you're talking about the scenario planning, agility, a willingness to challenge existing assumptions. So the example you just gave, I think, is a very interesting example. How do you, as a chair, reconcile the imperatives? Except for scenario planning, do you have other tips to share? The imperatives of stability on the one hand and the need for agility and resilience on the other hand.
Yeah, those are terms that look contradictory. Like, for example, the tension between short-term and long-term. You could say that a lot of companies are very good in the short term, but really our mission, because we are a financial market infrastructure, so we always look at the long term, is how you deliver the short term, maximizing long-term value, not only for our shareholders, but also for all our stakeholders, and I'll mention those in a second. But it starts by making sure that we deliver for our clients. Our ecosystem is the biggest banks around the world, all the big issuers, the big investors, the big broker-dealers in the middle, and we need to be relevant and continue to be more relevant to all of those. So I think you mentioned that the board is a guardian of, you said safety.
Security.
Yes. Well, I think security. The board is a guardian for our purpose.
Of course.
And our purpose is to innovate, to provide safety, efficiency, and connectivity to the global capital markets for sustainable economic growth. And every time we have a doubt around the board table, we go back to our purpose. And we try to make decisions that are completely aligned with our purpose. And our purpose was put together by our executives and in agreement with the board several years ago, and it still guides us, I think, exceptionally well when we have these very difficult decisions to make. So one other mission of the board, and therefore the chairman, is to make sure that you have the best team in the field to continue to focus on the clients, to create value for all stakeholders. And our stakeholders, first, most important and relevant ones are the clients. Second are our people. I call it the human capital. Then it's your supply chain and how you manufacture your services to deliver for your clients. And you need the best people to do that. Otherwise, your competitors will serve the clients better. And then also you need to focus on the communities where we operate and where our clients operate. And we're able to do all of those well, then is when you create shareholder value, not only over the short term, but over the long term. And that's been a model that I've used since very early in my career. It's worked very well at Citi, it's worked very well, I think, at Euroclear. And it works very well in other companies where I'm a board member of. So it really starts with the clients, starts with our people, starts with our ecosystem, supply chain ecosystem, and the communities. And on the last part, one of the things that our shareholders and our board has allowed Euroclear to do is start a foundation. So a percentage of our net earnings every year goes to fund our foundation. And now we have a foundation with a team, and we really hope that we can contribute to solve some of the most pressing problems in the communities where we operate, and we're really focusing on the underserved youth. And so our ambition is to bring the underserved youth to have the same opportunities in society that those are not underserved. So it's a start of a journey, but I'm very excited also about that part of the journey. And you can do all of that if you really have the best leadership in the company and the best executive team. So a guardian of our purpose and making sure that you have all the tools to deliver long-term value to your shareholders.
I like it very much, the idea of the purpose to align the interest, and the idea also of leadership that is needed to implement a purpose in the long-term interest of the stakeholders, which is exactly also what we stand for at GUBERNA. A whole different question. Euroclear processes trillions in transactions a day, and you have new regulations like DORA, but also the whole evolution of artificial intelligence, reinforcing the fact that digital and cyber resilience have become more and more board responsibilities. So what has changed that in practice for the board, and how do you see there the importance of people, the human factor related to artificial intelligence, which is, I think, also very important for your organization?
You're certainly right. I mean, I have to say we're going through probably one of the biggest transformations in society thanks to artificial intelligence, and in a number of variables. The first is the speed of adoption. Mm-hmm. I think artificial intelligence is the technologies that is being adopted at the highest speed of any technology, which means, to reach the first 100 million or a billion in a few months or a few weeks. But most importantly, I think, is the combination of artificial intelligence with all the other technological developments that have matured during the last few years or are maturing. And I mentioned a few. Blockchain technology, DLT, robotics, and all the implications from a financial services point of view, like crypto, digital assets, tokenization, distributed ledger technology, stable coins, to name a few. And on top of all of them, quantum computing is around the corner. So when you put it all together and you see that from a geopolitical point of view, these technologies are also leveraged to increase the power of those that have those technologies, you can see that we are really becoming a very polarized planet between those that have and those that don't. Or between, let me go back. I thought that we were going from a G7 to a G20 global governance model. I think we are today in a G2 governance model.
Unfortunately.
And I think Europe is trying to find its role. And you can say Europe is going through a big wake-up call. Mm-hmm. And we could look backwards, but what's important is to really look forward. And so Europe needs to find, the right priorities. I think we provide a society which first is a huge common market. And if you add the NAFTA agreement with Latin America, the fair free trade agreement with India, and a few others that the Commission is working on, I mean, that can represent the biggest single market that everybody will want to be a part of. It's not talked about enough, but it's a reality to become.
It's an important step. Yes.
Treaties have been signed, the execution is very challenging,
Yes.
but at least, there is the opportunity. We need to be more strategically autonomous on defense. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think not only the war in Ukraine, which is our doorsteps, but also what is happening in the Middle East. Energy, another big issue. The transition to green, huge opportunity, but also huge challenge if we cannot get supply of gas and oil, etc., etc. So I would say that we will one day thank Trump because he'll probably be the unwanted best friend of Europe. And Europe has always moved forward during a big crisis. And I think this is the monster of a crisis. Because you started asking me about AI, and I said the velocity of the adoption of AI is incredible. But when you combine it with all the other technologies that AI unleashes, the speed of transformation is just mind-boggling. And so if you go back from a governance point of view, what has really become key is scenario planning. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the board has a real important role to play, is to challenge the scenario planning that most executive teams do, to make sure that, we at least work and try to anticipate how the combination of all these forces, geopolitics, polarization on one side, the leverage of all these technologies, also pushing polarization, etc., can affect our company. And you, at the start, you said, the decisions are made by politicians and policymakers. You're absolutely right. But at least you can prepare and you can go through the thought process. What would you do if? Yes. And that then allows you to have multiple contingency plans that should serve the company very well, not only today, but tomorrow.
Very interesting. Also, the linking of artificial intelligence to all other complex revolutions that are ongoing now. And I indeed agree that Trump is shaking up Europe, and this might be, at the end, it should be at the benefit of Europe in the long run. To come back to AI, and you were saying the board has to challenge the scenario planning, amongst others, that the management is preparing. Do you see that boards are acting fast enough? Do they have sufficient expertise, and for all the different evolutions in society, and in particular for AI literacy? And do you... There's, of course, the AI touching the business models, but there's also the AI functioning, the use of AI within boards. Do you see already something happening there?
Well, let me answer this way. I think there is always room for improvement, right? When you have an environment that is changing so fast, mm-hmm. one could argue it's hard to keep up, but you have to try to anticipate. And the way you can anticipate is, practically speaking, has several dimensions. One of which is that you can spend all your board meetings talk about the last quarter. So it's a rear mirror view. Mm-hmm. And there's always a lot to talk about, the last quarters, the numbers, have you complied, blah, blah, blah. But I try to comply with what a very smart chair once told me. He said, the role of the chairman is really to decide when we have lunch. Because before lunch, you should deal with all the historical agenda items of the board. And then after lunch, you need to start discussing, thinking, and preparing for the future. And therefore, my mission at the board is to have lunch as close as possible to breakfast. because you cannot change the past, but you can certainly change
the future. Yes, indeed. And that brings me needless to my next question, which is about innovative governance. With GUBERNA, we're doing a research project on innovative governance, and as we see, it's about how can you use governance to innovate, but also how can boards themselves evolve? How can they develop new ways of working, new compositions, learning more from agile organizations like startups, more experimentation. Do you see Euroclear evolving on that journey? And is the board itself innovating? And is this überhaupt possible in a sector where a regulation is weighing very heavily? How do you see this?
But let me start with the last point, and then I just remember I did not answer your previous question with an example on how the board is using AI. But the regulation, I mean, we take it as a given, right? We are a financial market infrastructure which is systemic relevant, certainly for the European capital markets. You know, we have in our platforms more than 50% of the European assets. We settle more than 50% of the volume every day. You mentioned trillions a day. Let me give you another way to think about. We process every month more than global GDP.
All right.
So 12 times global GDP goes through our platforms every year. So it's really... And therefore we have supervisors through a panel of supervisors from every part of the globe that is systemically, where we're systemically relevant. So regulation is part of who we are, and we try to be a well-regulated entity, which means we try to meet not only the letter of the law but the spirit of the law. And you mentioned DORA before. DORA is aligned with what we're doing. We need to be prepared for the risk of the future, and cyber is one of the ones that have been more discussed recently. Yes. And cyber risk, because of our war in Ukraine and because we have all the Russian frozen liabilities or immobilized liabilities, etc. And so early on, even before I joined the board in 21, there was a specific focus. Then one could argue it's led by our regulators. I would argue it's led by the board, that we really needed to increase our defenses. And that ties into another part of your question where you say, you know, how do you change the board so that your board experience and as a group provides value to the company? Well, it's to make sure that at the margin you continue to upgrade. For example, we didn't have a lot of people that were really technologists around the board table a few years ago. Today we have. You know, do you need people that have been CEOs or chairs before because they can help you look at the big picture around the board table? Well, we have a few, and some of them you know very well, and I think that's a great place to be. And if we didn't have it, you know, we would have to bring it. Age diversity, gender diversity. I mean, very happy to report that at Euroclear we have parity from a gender point of view at the board level. You know, now I'm focused on ethnic diversity and age diversity. I think it's good to have all type of diversities around your board table, diversity of experience, diversity of thinking, and that allows the board to challenge in a better way the executives, in a positive way, but also to prepare for anything that comes our way, given these very difficult moments where there is a confluence of new technology, geopolitics that touch almost everything. And how do we use AI? Well, we're trying. First, we're using AI for minutes producing. So it's an efficiency tool, right?
Yes, right.
So you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours drafting the minutes and correcting the minutes because, you know, it reflects what the discussion was. And then we are trying, and, you know, we've signed up for a lot of Copilot licenses, which is a Microsoft product, so I think 4,500 licenses we have today. But at the board level, the ability of Copilot to review, the board information, for example, for the last 10 years, that it would take me a few weeks to go through, it takes Copilot a few minutes. If not indeed. Seconds.
Okay.
And so the ability of the board members to ask questions and relevant questions and questions that enable the board member to relate to consistency between today's presentation and the presentation of the last quarter, a year ago, 10 years ago, etc., has increased dramatically. And so I am played, and I think that technology is really very good to enable you to ask the relevant questions.
Yeah, great.
But on the other side, management can use the same technology to ask Copilot, what are the questions that the board will ask me? So the idea here is maybe we should have an additional board member, which is Copilot. Mm-hmm. And we're playing with the thoughts. We've not done it also because we're a highly regulated entity. And before we do anything, we want to make sure that it fits the bill. But artificial intelligence is enabling the boards to be more efficient and really cover much more information than what they had at their disposals before. And sooner or later, we want to be a first, like we've used Copilot to do some of the operational parts of the board. We're going to try to do it so that every board member can leverage the technology to be better at what they do, which is represent, their seat on the board of Euroclear.
Absolutely fascinating. We have been looking into the possibility already to have an AI board seat in the board. So,
but we've not done it yet. I don't want to get...
There's some also legal challenges, but it's interesting to see that you're really thinking about this. This also brings me to your other tip that you shared, the composition of the board, a composition related to expertise, related to ethnic diversity, related also to gender. And you are an organization where the board has set, it's one of my favorite topics, of course, an explicit target of at least 1/3 representation for the underrepresented gender. And this is monitored by the Nomination and Governance Committee. So you go much further than a statement of intent. And how do you steer that in practice? How do you make this a governance priority much more than just a compliance exercise? Because sometimes it's just a compliance exercise.
For us, it's really an exercise of continuing to improve the diversity around the board table. And as I said before, we're already at 50%.
Yeah.
So the minimum is 1/3.
Yeah.
Our stated and I think public goal is 40%, and we're at 50%. But that's one dimension of diversity. I mentioned age, where I think we're also doing okay, yes, but we can do better. Mm-hmm. Ethnicity, we can do better. And diversity in general allows for a better discussion around the board table. Mm-hmm. And the role of the chair is to bring all this knowledge, experience, diverse perspectives to the discussion on the board table. And as you very well know, there are some board members that speak a lot. There are some board members that never speak. So the role of the chair is to make sure that everybody's views are leveraged for the discussion for the benefit of the company.
As you know, certainly, is that diversity is indeed important for optimal decision-making, but too much diversity can also lead to difficult decision-making. But do you see that also as a point of attention?
But I think in the spectrum between everybody thinking the same way and everybody thinking in a different way, I would always go for the debate and the diversity, because I think that enables the company to really get the benefit from challenges that maybe the executives on their own, they would not have the benefit. And, the board should not be a pain factor. It should be a factor of alignment, of reinforcement of the direction, and as I said, of protection, not only of our purpose, but of the role we have in society.
Okay, great. And then, of course, you need a very good chair, which obviously you are, if you have a lot of diversity.
You're very kind. I try my best. That's the only thing I can say.
So a question also regarding board evaluation. We have seen that your board evaluates itself every year and also regularly does this with an external facilitator, and then the results feed directly into action plans. So how do you safeguard the quality and honesty of the evaluations, and what do you think is the added value of external facilitation?
Well, I think that the risk always is that you become very insular and you self-reference yourself. So I think an outside-in view is always important to keep everybody honest, including the chairman and the board members. So we have gone over the years through different external advisors and experts for these board evaluations. I will not mention the name, but we went from, the usual suspects, which normally are a division of a big group, and we've changed them over the years. But I really believe in going below the surface and try to understand clearly the dynamics and how we can continue to improve as a collegial body. At the end, that's the role of the board. And so the last time around, we have hired somebody who's very well known globally for governance, and that has been the managing partner of one of the biggest law firms around the globe. And he has done an in-depth interview with not only every board member, but also with the executives. And the combination of his experience in governance, these in-depth interviews with every board member and with the executives, plus he's come to a couple of board member and committee meetings as an observer, has enabled him, I think, to write one of the most action-oriented board effectiveness reviews that I've seen during my career. And then my responsibility is to make sure that those that make sense, and most of them made sense, are executed. And every time you want to change, you get some reaction.
Of course.
And some headwind. And so it's not easy, but I think we're very happy that we take these reviews very seriously. We always come up with an action plan. We decide who's in charge, what's the timetable, and then at the end of the year we score ourselves. Have we done what we said we were going to do, and how many of those recommendations we've implemented? And I think that in that sense, it's not easy work, but Euroclear has a process that really, I would say, from the boards I sit on, it's probably best in class.
I think it is, because you're combining all the important elements, which is a qualitative approach, not only quantitative approach, and also an outstanding follow-up on the action plan, because it's good to do an evaluation. If you don't do anything with the points that have been revealed, it's just a compliance exercise. So I think you're doing this very well. So we have learned a lot already, Francesco, regarding the governance and governance of Euroclear. I would like, before we move to the closing question, I would like to do to invite you to play our bingo ball game.
Before we do that, can I just complement the answer? Because you said, it's execution, and I agree, it's all about execution, but not only. I like to say that execution without a strategy is a daydream. But strategy without execution is a nightmare. So you need both. And fortunately, we have this very sense of purpose at Euroclear, not only because we're a systemic financial, a market infrastructure, but because we really believe to have a North Star that when in doubt, we can refer to make sure that we're taking the right decisions or that we're making the right challenges. So execution is exceptionally important, and fortunately, we have a fantastic executive team led by a fantastic CEO, and that makes life much easier for a board. when the relationship between, from a governance point of view, the board and the executives is a difficult one, with no transparency, no alignment, you can have the best chairman you want, or you can have the best CEO you want, but it creates some nightmare scenarios, which certainly are not at the benefit of the company.
I totally agree. So I will thank you for complimenting that. I also thank you again for highlighting the importance of purpose. You started with that, you ended with that. I think it's very important, the purpose, to align the different interests, to align the long term and the short term, and to align all the stakeholders. And then also, of course, the necessity of good execution. So thank you. So are you ready to do the bingo ball game?
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
So
I think this is an excellent idea.
Yeah, so please, I invite you to turn the handle and to take one ball, and then I think it's in the other direction. It's all right. And then you give it to me, and depending on, yes, okay, that's a lucky number 37. So I have to go and look on my list. Okay, it's a very difficult question, Francesco. Are you ready for it?
Always. I'll give it my best.
Okay. So we have discussed a lot of challenges today: geopolitics, cyber threats, artificial intelligence, governance in itself. So it's a double question. Which one of these challenges keeps you up at night, and which gives you the most hope?
That's a really hard question. So, of all these challenges, I would say that is the combination of the challenges in terms of potential headwind or backwind for the company I chair. And I'll give you an example. It's obvious that artificial intelligence could be a great enabler of efficiency. So from a stakeholder value point of view, that's very high. Mm-hmm. But then distributed ledger technology and blockchain, can really be defining the terminal value of the company. And so if you get it right, it's a big enhancer to terminal value. If you get it wrong, it can destroy your terminal value.
It keeps you
so
up.
The combination of those two things is one example of what keeps me awake at night. And you combine that with the geopolitics that we discussed at the start of the call, and you can see that there are a lot of reasons to keep me awake at night. And then I really worry, how can I leave this company in a better position than when I started as chairman? And, it's the same question I have on my two daughters, as they go from high school to university. Have I done everything I could have done to prepare them well for the next stage of their lives? And it's kind of the same challenge that we have for the company. And so, geopolitics, this anxiety created by the wars, the anxiety created by the adoption of the new technologies. If you do too soon, you might make a mistake. If you do it too late, you also destroy value, etc. And then how we can be helpful in the communities where we operate. I think those are always the reflection I make, and I try my best to stay awake during the day, but to sleep at night, because otherwise
it's always a good idea.
It all becomes a big nightmare.
Yes, of course. And so, what gives you the most hope? Also linking the challenges to the future of our children. Technology.
I think that, there are a lot of people, including those that started, this artificial intelligence revolution, that say, kill the technology before it destroys us. Because the point where autonomous intelligence is going to be more intelligent, quote unquote, than human beings, it's very close. And once we get there, there are going to be some other huge question marks that today you see the experts debating, like the ethics of artificial intelligence. What about if the autonomous intelligence is really stronger than our intelligence? That means that maybe one day we cannot stop it, etc., etc. I remember 60 years ago, I read Isaac Asimov. And if you go back to some of his books, it's really, he was really talking about what is happening today. Yeah. And so that's another reason to stay awake at night. But most importantly, I think that the human being at the end is able to master the new technologies for the benefit of all. And when I say all, I really mean all. And this divergence between those that have and those that don't is really one of the things that should keep all of us awake at night. Because if we continue this way, bad things will happen.
That's a very nice message to close with, and that's also what I think you are trying to do at Euroclear with the foundation, right? So
absolutely.
That's really a very nice message to close with. Unless we have some minutes left, there's something still you want to add, Francesco?
No, I thank you for your time and for this very enjoyable conversation.
Grazie mille.
Prego.
This was a rich and honest conversation, exactly the kind we love to have at GUBERNA. So also thank you to our listeners for joining us today. Note that the whole interview will be available also as a written article on our website. And we hope, together with Francesco, that this conversation sparked some thinking about your own board, your own organization, and the world your governance has to navigate. So do contact us if we can be of any governance assistance, because we also believe in our purpose, as Francesco highlighted. Better governance, better organizations, a better world. Thank you.